Ash framed the dawn above Dragonstone in rose-gold light, soft enough to flatter the ragged scars that marked the stone courtyards, yet bright enough for ravens to beat their wings toward every waiting kingdom. Jon watched their specks disappear against a paling sky, his black cloak luffing in a warm sea breeze that smelled of salt and smoldered dragon glass. He felt the shape of Ghost's absence at his heel, sent north to run unfettered across icebound forest, and wondered if the dire wolf missed him, or if wolves, like men, could forgive what they loved for giving them freedom. Bare feet whispered across the balcony behind him. Daenerys drew close without ceremony. Silver-white hair unbraided, loose against her shoulders, in a way it had never been when she commanded armies. She wore no crown. The crown lay buried beneath the melted iron throne she'd asked Drogon to spill along the black sands far below. Iron, gold, Valyrian steel fused into one enormous, useless lump. Its twisted metal still hissed when the tide reached it, and fishermen muttered that the sea itself feared to swallow so much history. Jon turned. Morning light gilded her cheeks and caught the faint shadows under her eyes. She had slept, but only lightly, wrestling dreams of ash-covered streets and innocent screams she could never silence. He knew. She woke with her fingers clutching his wrist every night. He never pulled away. "Are you sending ravens again?" she asked. The softness of her voice disguised iron beneath, the same tempered metal he had seen when she strode before unsullied ranks or mounted Drogon's bare neck. But the old cruelties seemed to have burned away with King's Landing's embers. What remained was resolve. Jon said. "We need every lord's answer before we cross the narrow sea." "They'll argue," she said. "Argue about taxes, titles, precedents, everything we just try to unmake." "We can't force them," Jon said. "If we're to build something better, it has to be theirs as much as ours." Daenerys stepped beside him, balanced arms on the parapet. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries looping like questions between water and sky. "There will be those who love the old chains." "Then they can wear them," Jon replied. "No one else will." A ghost of a smile flickered. "You were never fond of crowns," she said. "I killed one," Jon said quietly. "Doesn't mean I know how to wear one." She slipped her hand into his. "Then we'll rule without one." Wind slid along the stones, teasing flap after flap from banners that bore no crest, only pale cloth fluttering empty as parchment. That blankness, Jon thought, was invitation. What sigil would the world choose for itself, freed from the Iron Throne's shadow? He squeezed her fingers. For a moment, he felt how unnatural contentment could seem to a man forged in war. Their council convened in the shattered throne room of Dragonstone, quartz dust still sparkling in the joints of the long table that once mapped Aegon's conquest. Davos Seaworth stood where east bled into south, palms flat, voice low. "We sail when the last grain ship arrives from Pentos," he said. "Any day now, if the storms stay polite." Tyrion Lannister leaned back, the white streak in his beard stark against sunburned skin. "Ships enough for grain," he said. "But what about people? King's Landing refugees choke the roads from the Wendwater to the Rosewad. They don't need bread alone. They need roofs, wells, guildsmen to rebuild trade." "Which we can't pay for," Arya cut in. She perched cross-legged on the table's narrow edge, a shade older, sharper in her silences, her eyes gray knives. "The Lannister gold is buried beneath half a city. We have the Reach's harvest and what the Vale sent, little else." Jon rested knuckles on oak worn smooth by 3 centuries of scheming. "Gold bought swords," he said, "and swords bought fear. Fear stacked corpses into the throne Daenerys burned. We'll build with promises instead. Grain for the hungry, seed and lumber for villages that stand with us, justice for those who kneel to none but their own laws." Murmurs wove through the gathered captains. Davos scratched his beard. "And if promises feed no bellies by winter's kiss, then we fail, and the world returns to crowns and chains." Jon answered, and let that possibility hang heavy. Daenerys sat silent till the voices settled. She tapped a single parchment scroll. "Astapor's envoy proposes a pact," she said. "They'll send us coin and engineers in exchange for harbor rights beneath Dragonmont and a seat on our new council." Tyrion snorted. "Astapor sells everything except the air between their teeth. They see profit where we see need." "Perhaps," Daenerys allowed. "But profit can be bent to purpose. Let them build at cost, and we'll pay them later in trade routes. Silk, glass, Dornish wine. Everyone gains or no one does." She met each pair of eyes in turn, and Jon saw the flicker, the same ember he had feared when dragonfire lit the Red Keep stones red-hot. Only now it burned clearer, shaped by humility and sleepless remorse. He nodded his support, and the council's objections melted, though not without wary glances. When decisions were set, and parchment sealed for ravens again, Jon found Arya alone in the yard, her gaze tilted toward Drogon's massive shadow stretched across the bailey walls. "He's grown," she said. "Dragons do," Jon replied. "He won't like Essos. Too many other dragons awake there now, I hear." Jon shrugged. "He follows Daenerys, not for love of kingdoms." Arya traced dust patterns beneath her boot. "And you? What do you follow?" "None." He almost smiled. "I've asked myself the same since the wall fell." He watched clouds peel apart above the gullet. "I follow what won't ruin me in the doing." "Not a banner easily stitched," Arya said. "But I suppose a wolf never loved heraldry." He met her steady gaze. "Will you come with us? The world's bigger than Westeros." She touched Needle's worn hilt. "One day. First, I'll hunt ghosts still lingering on these shores. Then maybe I'll sail beyond maps where men haven't yet built ladders of swords." "Lemshrine." He rested a hand on her shoulder. The brother he had known in her nodded inside the stranger she had become. "We'll hold a place for you at any table we build." Arya nodded, unsentimental, grateful. The fleet passed Blackwater Bay on waters polished to hammered steel, white sails luffing like wings. On the prow of the flagship, a Taroshi caravel named Quiet Fury, Jon stood with Daenerys, staring at the soot-stained ruins of King's Landing. Amid crooked charred spires, life had already sprouted wild. Vines burst through fissured stone, and bright weeds licked sunlight between collapsed pillars. The Red Keep lay wrecked, but its foundations held, black scars obvious even from the distance. Daenerys' breath caught. Jon felt her fingers tighten on the rail. "It should never have happened," she whispered. "No shrine words or songs can unmake it." Jon forced himself to see it as neither penance nor victory, but warning. "We'll build cities that never tempt such choice again," he said. But the promise tasted impossible. The ships angled east, sails snapping fuller. By night, torches flickered along the decks. By dawn they glimpsed Pento's pale domes, glowing like risen moons above the sea haze. On a terrace of red marble, the Magister Illyria welcomed them. Older, flesh looser around knowing eyes. Gold-brocaded servants poured honeyed wine while musicians trilled Parashi tales of dragonlords who carved islands from flame. Yet the conversation soon cut through ceremony. Coin, timber shipments, the price of forged nails and brick masons. Tyrion argued until dawn with Pentoshi bankers, calculating interest rates that bent beneath the weight of future prosperity. But the world's future remained intangible, carved only in words and trust. Meanwhile, Jon and Daenerys toured slums that pressed close to harbor walls. Children chased the swirl of Drogon's shadow overhead, laughing, unafraid. A dragon was spectacle, but hunger was daily companion. Daenerys knelt in alley dust beside a coughing girl, pressed a lemon sweet into her palm, then walked away with tears tracing silent patterns on her cheeks. They slept little in Pentos. Each night, Daenerys dreamed of bells tolling, and Jon dreamt of cold winds pushing beyond the broken tower at Winterfell, harbingers of wars yet unborn. When the last contract's wax cooled, they sailed east again, hugging coasts where villages burned recently by slavers still smoldered. Jon dispatched soldiers to free chained captives, and Daenerys had the chains smelted into plowshares by braziers, glowing under starlight. At Meereen, they were met by throngs chanting Misa, though Daenerys had not ruled there in years. She spoke from a balcony overlooking the great pyramid's wind-scourged stairs. "I will not be your queen but your sister," she called, her Valyrian ringing clear. "Help us shape a world where thrones are empty and every hearth is guarded by its own people. The roar that followed was ragged but true, the sound of a promise glimpsed if not grasped. Still, not everyone cheered. Sons of the Harpy remnants crouched behind shuttered lattices, fingers itching at daggers. Jon knew insurgency wore many faces. Some hope-starved, some merely cruel, and each must be met differently. So squads of Northmen and Dothraki patrolled nights, while scribes transcribed new codes of law onto clay tablets set in public squares. No man might own another under penalty of exile. Blood was still spilled. But each dawn, Meereen woke to see the dragon perched above the pyramid, a living verdict that the old order had ended. Years stretched. Councils multiplied. Languages collided across tables, where parchment maps were redrawn without borders. The conclave of Volantis convened beneath striped awnings beside the Black Vine Canal. The Dothraki Khals sat cross-legged on pine boards in Lorathus marble amphitheater. Tycho Nestoris brought Braavosi coins and contracts promising debts forgiven if the world's new charter endured a decade. Jon learned to listen more than speak. He found steel in silence. Words could ruin more than swords if flung without thought. Daenerys spoke often, but not alone. She yielded floor to freedmen's voices, to fishermen's wives who knew how tides sculpted trade, to scribes who argued that knowledge shared was the surest wealth. The world began to conceive laws unmoored from royalty. Councils elected for 5-year spans, rotating presidencies so no single city could hoard power. Charters limiting any army's size, tribunals where grievances crossed cultural lines. Resistance took root wherever privilege eroded. Rogues styled themselves kings of the narrow sea or lords of stone and sky, but they conquered little before coalitions of newly allied ports starved them of grain. A sellsword host tried to seize Myr. Braavosi lenders foreclosed their own contracts, stranding the mercenaries without pay. Without coin, they surrendered. Few sought crowns afterward. Yet the hardest battle was memory. Everywhere stood statues of kings, stained glass of conquerors, songs praising one blood's right to rule. They could not melt every monument as easily as the Iron Throne, nor did Jon think they should. He argued to keep them, so children would ask why the old world fell. So the weight of mistakes stayed visible. One autumn sunset, atop Meereen's pyramid, Jon and Daenerys looked west. Dragons, Drogon vast and scarred, Rhaegal's 2 clutch-spawned sleek emerald and bronze, circled above cranes erecting skyports for merchants to load spice by air. Still, the horizon whispered home. Winterfell's weirwood will be red now, Jon murmured. Daenerys laced her fingers with his. When the charter is signed, in Tharsis at midsummer, they will need symbols. Not banners, but people to swear that no crowns hide behind parchment. We should go north, bring those who doubt. Now, he half smiled. You want to herd Starks and Umbers and Mormonts onto ships full of Dothraki horsemen. They'll travel, she teased, for the wolf who bent no knee yet made himself peace of my heart. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Then we sail at dawn. The voyage westward felt different. Fewer warships, more lumbering transports laden with marble, books, and wine. The world, Jon thought, was learning to trade then raid. They reached White Harbor, under northern lights that flickered green and violet above the masts, as though the wall's own spirit had followed them. The city quaked with excitement. Rumors of dragons had preceded them on every autumn wind. Lyanna Mormont, grown into a rangy young woman, greeted Jon with a hug that cracked his ribs, then bowed to Daenerys not as queen but as flame-bearer, a Mormont rechristening born of campfire tales. From Winterfell, Sansa came south with lords of every northern house still standing. She and Daenerys clasped forearms in truce long matured into respect. The past lay silent beneath snows that would never entirely melt, yet they had shaped one another. Feasts spanned a week beneath Winterfell's rebuilt hall. Jon walked quiet corridors, running fingers along new timber where fire once licked. Rand's weirwood throne, carved not into seat of rule but cradle of sight, stood at the great hall's far end. His vacant eyes saw through ages, far beyond petty crowns. He told Jon, Time is a river that flows not toward thrones but toward mouths that drink its water. Keep the river clean. Jon was never sure if Bran spoke to him or to all men at once. On the 8th morning, snowflakes spinnered silver across training grounds where Unsullied drilled beside northern volunteers, sharing forms of spear and shield. Tyrion stood by, scribbling notes on combined tactics to police disputed borders without occupying them. The world truly was changing, Jon thought, when Grey Worm corrected an Umber lad's stance, while a wildling woman demonstrated dragonglass arrowheads. That night, the northern delegation pledged to send envoys to Tharsis. Sansa promised grain shipments. Lyanna pledged timber. Even gruff Lord Glover muttered assent, though he still missed the simplicity of banners and battles. Jon and Daenerys left Winterfell before dawn, riding south through frosted rapeseed fields to White Harbor, where their flagship waited. Ghost padded from trees to shove his great head under Jon's hand, then loped back into woods, testament that some bond never needed chains. As sails filled, Jon watched Winterfell's towers shrink. He felt neither ruler nor rebel, only steward to a fragile hope. Daenerys brushed his shoulder. "When all this is done," she said, "what then for us?" "We'll find a farm someplace," Jon said. "Grow onions and barley, breed horses that never know war." She laughed, a sound lighter than he had heard in years. "And dragons?" "Dragons can guard the sky," Jon said. "They've earned rest too." Tharsis lay where 3 continents nearly touched. Steppe grass, jade rivers, and cliffs carved into cities. At midsummer, envoys unfurled tents, patterned in every dye of the known world. They laid a dais of cedar planks, upon which stood a single table, ringed by empty chairs. No throne presided, only the great bronze bell of Tharsis, so old the tongue inside was rumored forged from a fallen meteor. On the appointed day, lords, carls, magisters, priests, freedmen, delegates, merchant princes, and fisherfolk spokeswomen arrayed themselves in no set order. Daenerys, clad in plain linen, took her seat last, beside Jon in northern gray. Their names were read not as titles, but as witnesses. The charter was recited, first in High Valyrian, then in the 9 tongues most spoken across the continents, then in scratchy dialects of hill tribes, whose lands would no longer be taxed by far-off kings. Each article echoed through the wide meadow. No person may claim dominion by blood alone. No army shall march beyond its homeland, without a council's majority consent. No city shall bind another to trade under threat of arms. Justice shall answer to assemblies chosen by the people every 5th year. Dragonfire shall never again be bent to punish the helpless. When silence followed, the bell of Tharsis tolled thrice. One by one, delegates stepped forward, set their seal on parchment, and spoke a pledge. "I bind myself to this world without throne." Some wept, some scowled, some gripped the table as though it might vanish. When the last seal cooled, ravens launched in black torrents, each bearing copies to every corner of earth. Crowds erupted beyond the meadow, drums thundering, flutes screaming joy. Jon felt tears prick his eyes. Daenerys squeezed his hand. Later, under lanterns strung from cedar beams, Tyrion raised a cup. "You both realize," he said, "that in 15 years, these same folk will convene again to quarrel over grain tariffs." "Good," Daenerys said. "As long as they quarrel with words." Tyrion laughed. "Spoken like a queen who refuses crowns. Call me queen again, and I'll make you quartermaster of latrine ditches," she teased. Tyrion bowed. "A your mage, as Daenerys wishes." That night, Jon slipped away to the hillside where Drogon roosted. Stars shimmered above, and the dragon's slow breathing stirred dust eddies at his feet. Jon laid a palm on scaled warmth. "Guard them," he whispered. "All of them." Drogon's eye, molten gold, blinked. There were no words, but the creature's chest rumbled, a sound older than language, promising watchfulness. Footsteps whispered. Daenerys approached, cloak fluttering. Side by side they watched meteors streak violet through high sky, burning stones that never quite reached earth, yet lit every face turned upward. "Tomorrow," she said, "delegations will ask where our capital shall stand. Nowhere, John said. Every place. She nodded. Then we'll walk forever. Until walking's no longer needed. Moonlight silvered her hair. She rested her head on his shoulder. And if the world falters, we'll steady it, he said, and though he knew no vow endured unbroken, he believed this one with all the stubborn faith of a child born of winter and fire. The wind swept hillside grass into waves. Dragons stirred overhead, casting brief shadows like gigantic winged oaths, across a land no crown would ever dominate again. Wind rambled through the grasslands of Tharsis long after the lanterns dimmed, whispering through tents where delegates dreamt of the dawn that would test the ink still drying on their monumental charter. Daenerys Targaryen slipped from the circle of lamplight and crossed the meadow barefoot, hem of her cotton robe brushing dew-heavy blades. She felt the wetness cool her blood, easing the fiery restlessness that always came after triumph. She had learned by bitter experience that victory was never the end but a doorway into new uncertainty. She found John at the riverbank below, kneeling where moonlight silvered gentle ripples. He was washing parchment dust from his hands, as if confession alone might cleanse all doubt. When he heard her approach, he did not rise, only turned his head so she could see the quiet turmoil in his eyes. "We just promised the world a life without chains," he said. "Tomorrow, they'll realize how heavy freedom feels." Daenerys knelt beside him, pressed her palm to the back of his neck. "Load enough seasons into any promise and it will buckle, but that does not mean we leave it unspoken." She let her fingers drift to the river, drawing eddies with her fingertips. "We built this charter knowing it can and will break. Our task is not to keep it perfect. It's to keep it worth mending." "Mending?" John inhaled the damp air, head bowed. "Worth mending," he repeated, tasting the word. Then he looked up at her. "There's another matter I must speak of." Sansa wrote while we sailed. "The dead do not sleep easy in the barrows of the north. The old tales stir, and with them fear. She asks that we send strength before winter's first howl." Daenerys brushed a strand of hair behind his ear. "We'll go. The world can wait for us to start our tour of city councils. The north cannot." "Daenerys, us." They rose together, walking back toward the lantern glow, sharing the silence as naturally as breath. Neither spoke again until they parted before their tent. Even then, no more had to be said. Their lips met once, lightly, but the kiss carried each worry they had not voiced and every trust they had not needed to. 2 weeks passed in a blur of logistics. Tyrion Lannister sketched road networks by lamplight, drawing supply lines that braided seas and steppes together like cords of a single rope. Davos Seaworth arranged convoys, grain from Pentos, wool from Myre, iron from the islands beyond the Stepstones, all bound for White Harbor. Grey Worm drilled cohorts of unsullied volunteers who would winter garrison across the north, not as conquerors but as escorts, sworn to northern law and discipline. The charter forbade foreign occupation. Jon and Daenerys were determined to obey its spirit. Every unsullied carried a writ signed by Sansa Stark herself, declaring them honored guardians invited, not imposed. Near the river, smiths hammered dragon-forged chains into plowshares under Regal's molten exhalations. The sound rang like temple bells, striking hope into nerves still raw from war. Yet unease remained. Caravans whispered of a clandestine league calling itself the Ember Hand. Dispossessed noblemen, slavers, merchants ruined by the abolition of titles, quietly gathering coin and mercenaries in abandoned keeps from the Stormlands to Newgeese. The Ember Hand made no open threat. They sowed rumor instead, that the charter was a Targaryen ruse to rule under another name, that dragonfire would scorch dissent once the world was lulled to sleep. Fear's roots thrive in silence, and silence spreads quickly where ravens cannot outrun suspicion. Jon met the rumors with dispatches, parchment bearing his uncompromising promise. No dragons would fly in battle unless the charter fell, no council would sit above the law. Daenerys answered with actions. Fundraries repurposed for wheel rims, not spears. Dragon glass shipped free to coastal villages to carve fishing hooks and harvest blades. Yet she felt the Ember Hand's whispers at night like insects in her pillow stuffing, an itch that would not ease. Autumn's edge brushed the sails as their fleet curved northward. Drogon shadowed the flagship, wings spanning half the width of the bay, but he did not roar. The open sky soothed him. Jon watched the dragon's slow sweeping strokes and wondered if peace could ever cradle such power. A dragon was born for ruin. To deny it, ruin was to deny its nature. Could the same be true of kingdoms? Grey worms stood beside him in the salt spray. Rumors grow, the eunuch said, voice steady as flint. Unsullied patrols hear of Emberhand cells infiltrating free ports. They speak of a single leader, the scalded king. Jon tightened his grip on the rail. Stories need faces. They conjure one so their own faces can hide. Grey Worm nodded. Chosen or invented, the name rallies them. A rally becomes an army, given time. Jon glanced aloft, where Drogon rode unseen thermals. If they arm, we answer, but not first with fire. We answer with witnesses and truth. Let them speak their accusations at open council. The unsullied commander studied the horizon. They may choose blood. Then we bleed, Jon said grimly, but only protecting. Grey Worm saluted with 2 fingers to his heart. As you command. White Harbor greeted them beneath swirling snow flurries, early harbingers of a winter that had chosen haste. Sansa's banner, a direwolf argent on a field of soft gray, hung from newly mended walls below strings of lantern glass. From decks, sailors smelled roasting leeks, onion pies, and the hemp-sharp bite of northern ale. The city thrummed with purpose. Wharves swelled with crates, masons retiled roofs, children hauled straw to barns being reinforced for heavier drifts. Ghost padded down the gangplank ahead of Jon, white fur ruffling in the biting wind. The direwolf trotted to Sansa and licked her gloved hand before bounding to inspect unfamiliar carts. Sansa embraced Jon, then Daenerys. Her hair, copper bright, was braided in the northern style, but a blue shawl of Korth silk draped her shoulders like a symbol of the wider world she now helped steer. Ghost looks thicker, Jon observed. He feasts like a small bear and commands more respect than half my garrison, Sansa said, smiling. Daenerys tilted her head. How fares Winterfell? Repaired walls, too few hands, Sansa answered. And something else. She gestured toward a warehouse-converted hall on the quay. Show you inside. Within, scores of farmers huddled around crackling braziers, each guarded by a pair of northern soldiers. Sansa led them to a dais where a shaggy-haired shepherd waited, cap clutched to his chest. This is Mellor from the last Hearth Valley, Sansa said softly. Tell them. Mellor swallowed. My lord, my ladies, he stammered. Last moon's waning, our ewes started birthing still. Then dogs howled every dusk, and at dawn frost clung black to the grass, black like ash. We followed tracks to the old stone circle in Deadgrove Wood. Found it cracked open. Standing stones shifted like doors. Something walked out, my lord. Something that left no prints. Nenepimsao. Daenerys exchanged a look with Jon. And your people. Won't sleep near the grove, Mellor whispered. Say whites roam again. I don't know, but fear's biting deeper than any snow. Jon laid a hand on Mellor's arm. We'll ride tonight. Sansa frowned. Take soldiers, if it is the Ember Hand. If the dead, soldiers may die pointlessly, Jon interjected. We'll bring one company as escort, Drogon above if needed. Daenerys touched Jon's sleeve. I'll fly with him. Night drifted down like a shroud by the time the party left White Harbor. Jon, Daenerys astride a silver-gray courser, Davos, 24 unsullied, and a handful of seasoned Mormont scouts. Drogon wheeled overhead, a myth reborn against wintry clouds, the beat of his wings scattering frightened ravens. The last Hearth Valley lay buried under a silence so profound even the horses' breaths puffed with hesitation. A half-collapsed barn leaned like a drunk on a fence. Jon dismounted, signaled a halt, and motioned the unsullied to fan out. Under the waning moon, the standing stones of Deadgrove emerged, 12 granite monoliths older than the oldest Stark crypt, each etched with whorls eroded into near invisibility. The ring's center, however, was no longer grass. A chasm yawned where earth had ruptured. Frost rimmed its edges, black indeed, but lustrous, almost oily. Davos crouched to touch it, withdrew his fingertip with a hiss. Colder than the wall's top in deep winter, and wet, like frozen tar. Daenerys stared into the pit. A faint amber glimmer pulsed far below, slow as a heartbeat. Dragonfire once melted stone until it flowed, she murmured. But this ice burns. Jon's breath clouded. Bran must see. He closed his eyes, summoning visions of weirwood roots, of ravens wheeling over the world's bones. No sight came, only a distant sense of hollow hunger. A whisper slithered between the stones. Grey Worm pivoted, spear ready, but no foe stepped forth. Instead, snow swept inward, swirling into a human outline, a figure half real, eyes like candlelit ice. It spoke in a voice cracked by ages. The words were old tongue, twisted and lost, but still intelligible to Jon's half-forgotten senses. Breaker of rings, it croaked. Shatterer of crowns, you melt iron, yet winter's crown you cannot unmake. Jon's spine chilled. What are you? The apparition's gaze slid to Daenerys. Mother of flame, but flame can birth frost. It drifted closer, air frosting around its passage. Ghost growled, fur bristling, but did not charge. Daenerys met the apparition's stare without blinking. Do you name yourself? Names perish, it whispered. Us did mine when black snow fell upon the dawn age. I am called memory when tongues can shape me. Men. Jon stepped between it and Daenerys. Why appear now? Because you widen cracks between what was and what may yet be. There can be no world without thrones. Something must rule. If not man, then winter. If not winter, then fire. Balance bleeds, child of ice and child of ash. Daenerys' fingers curled, but she restrained fury. Then teach us balance. The apparition regarded her almost kindly. I will teach with riddle. When the wolf runs under the dragon's wing, and the rivers forget their beds, you must bury your crowns again, or the sky will fall bright as noon upon a midnight land. Da! With that, the specter dissolved. Snow settled. Silence claimed a grove anew. Davos exhaled shakily. Sweet Seven, save us, what was that? Daenerys stepped to the pit's edge. The amber light surged once, then dimmed. A herald, she said. Of what? I don't know. Jon gazed toward the North Star, steady above the trees. Whatever comes, we stand as before, together. Morning found them at Winterfell's gate. Bran awaited in the godswood, eyes pale as noonday sky. Jon recounted the specter's message. Bran listened without expression. The doorways between seasons have never closed, Bran said finally. You ended the long nights, General, not its memory. Magic is like river water. You may dam it, but it seeps through stone, carves new paths. That pit is a spring head, and the water taste of death. Daenerys frowned. Can it be sealed? Perhaps, Bran allowed. But you must learn what stirs beneath. Fire alone will not suffice. Ice alone neither. Tyrion arrived mid-discussion, parchment in hand. Ravens from Braavos, he announced. Our charter has been challenged. The Triarchy of the Stepstones claims shipping rights that contradict Article 12. They've seized 3 grain ships bound for Old Town. Jon rubbed his temples. Winter at our door, pirates at our corn, supernatural pits in our barrows. We built a world quickly, but we cannot be everywhere at once. Nor should we, Tyrion said. Delegations can argue the charter on their own, but ports need a fleet, and the pit needs scholars or sorcerers. Bran's gaze drifted toward the East Tower, where Samwell Tarly pored over hidden libraries. There is a man who reads histories none believe. Sam will come. Sam arrived at Deadgrove a fortnight later, bundled in furs, spectacles fogged. He carried scrolls older than Old Town's topmost spire. Beside him trudged Gilly, cheeks rosy, and their boy, now stout and curious. Sam spread his texts on a rough-hewn table inside a tent pitched at the grove's edge. There are tales of black snow, he began, tapping a brittle vellum. An event, before the first men, when ash fell like snow, but burned cold. Some scholars think it was a meteor storm, others volcanic dust. Whichever, it birthed strange frost that burned life. The children of the forest battled it with songs of living wood and dragon hearts. Then, Daenerys leaned over the parchment. Dragon hearts? Are we speaking metaphor or fact? Sam shrugged. The scroll claims they planted hearts of fallen fireworms at key ley lines, binding flame to sap. Over millennia the hearts petrified into something called ember glass, lava frozen by magic. It restrained the frost but did not purge it. If the pit holds ember glass beneath, Jon rubbed his beard, then removing or disturbing it could unleash what it binds. Grey Worm stepped in from the snowfall. Scouts report Emberhand banners near Last River Crossing. Red gauntlet wreathed in flames. They march south, 200 spears, sells words and angry farmers. Tyrion exhaled. An uprising by men while an ancient curse stirs underneath. The gods do love layering tragedies. Jon turned to Daenerys. Will Drogon's presence deter? Perhaps, she said. But terror no longer serves. We promised open councils. Never not. Open councils with blades at their backs are still open, Arya said, joining them silently. Her eyes glittered with wind-born excitement. I tracked the Emberhand 3 days. Their commander is no sellsword. He's Corin Whiteflame, once of the Golden Company. Bastard of House Fell, burned in the siege of Storm's End. They say dragonfire scarred him to the bone, left him half-melted. He wears a bronze mask fused to his face. Daenerys closed her eyes. The scalded king. Arya nodded. He blames dragons and all who fly with them. Jon straightened. Then I will meet him tomorrow at the Last River Ford, alone Tochoy. Tyrion choked. Alone? Jon kept his voice calm. He wants a single tyrant to hate. Show him a man instead. Daenerys stepped forward, fingers gripping his sleeve. You're not dying at a river ford to satisfy a phantom's vengeance. I won't, he said gently. I'll ride with Davos and a banner of parley. Let him choose peace. She searched his eyes, found unshakable resolve, and released him. Then, I come above, she said. Drogon will circle unseen in clouds. If they strike treacherously, I'd rather dragons above than behind, Jon conceded. The ford lay under a sallow sun that failed to warm skin. Jon rode first, banner of plain linen snapping, Davos a pace behind. On the opposite bank 200 men waited, patchwork armor, shields daubed with red handprints. At their center sat a horseman in black steel, helm shaped like a melted crown. No face visible within, only darkness. Jon dismounted in midstream where water swirled knee-deep. He called across, I am Jon Snow. No king, no lord of crowns, speak. The rider nudged forward. Up close the helm revealed itself, a mask welded to scarred flesh beneath. Eyes burned behind slits. Eyes of a man who had gazed too long at his own agony. I am Corin Whiteflame, he rasped. Burned thrice, by dragonfire, by broken oath, and by the world's applause of tyrants. You broke the throne, Targaryen pup, yet kept the dragon. You call that mercy? Jon's breath steamed. I kept the dragon as I kept the wolf, as living beings deserve life, but I bound it to peace. Peace forged in fear. Whiteflame leaned low in his saddle. Yield the beasts to me so I may cast them into the pit your ancestors opened. Only then is peace honest. That pit contains older horrors, Jon said. Kill dragons, and you may free something no man can face. Whiteflame laughed, a brittle sound. Then let it come. Better fresh terror than old lies. Jon's jaw tightened. Come across. Sit at council. Lay your grievance before the world. The scalded king drew his sword. It glimmered red, edge chipped but keen. My counsel is this blade. My grievance its cut. He spurred forward, water exploding around hooves. Jon stood fast. Davos cursed behind him but did not draw steel. Whiteflame raised the sword high. and shadow eclipsed the sun. Drogon descended, wings slamming air into a cyclone. White Flame pulled short, horse rearing. Flame did not spew. Drogon merely landed behind Jon, talons carving riverbed rock. The giant head lowered until amber eyes met the scalded king's. Jon's voice carried over the roar of wings. "This is Drogon, son of sky and fire. He will not burn unless I die. Strike, and you kill only yourself and your men." White Flame's sword wavered. The silence grew immense. Drip of water off Drogon's scales, hiss of steam where his breath touched river. In that stillness, something cracked inside the scalded king, a schism where rage had rooted. His shoulders sagged. Sword tip dipped. "My pain means nothing to this beast," he whispered hoarsely. "Nor yours." Jon sheathed Longclaw deliberately. "Let's speak beyond fear." He offered his hand. The mask tilted, eyes warred with hate and disbelief. Then White Flame slumped from the saddle into river cold. Davos splashed to catch him. The Emberhand ranks faltered, but no arrows flew. On the bank, Drogon lifted his head, bellowed once. A blast of raw frustration turned upward into open sky and launched, beating wind that toppled banners. Jon watched until the dragon dwindled small as a crow, then led White Flame, shivering and broken, toward camp. Corin White Flame sat in a canvas chair before a brazier while Maester Wolkan salved his weeping scars. Arya knelt across from him, cleaning her dagger leisurely. He eyed the blade but made no move. Jon stepped inside. "Your men are quartered and fed. No chains unless they choose violence." White Flame spoke through cracked lips. "The river cooled my fury. What remains is shame." He touched his mask. "I am bound to my vengeance." Daenerys entered behind Jon. The scalded king flinched but did not rise. She said, "Remove it." He looked confused. She nodded to Arya. The girl approached. Loosened leather straps fused into half-melted skin. Pain lanced White Flame's face. He groaned, but he did not resist. The mask fell with a dull thunk, revealing ravaged flesh. One ear gone, hair seared to wisps. Tears streaked through scar tissue. Daenerys set the mask on the ground. Dragonfire did not do this. A dragon wielded by a tyrant did. Blame the hand, not the beast. "Bemantur." "What difference now?" White Flame whispered. Jon knelt. "A hand healed the world tonight. Yours, you stopped." The scarred man stared at the mask. "My men. Free to stay or go," Jon said. "If they stay, they help feed northern villages this winter. If they go, they travel under safe passage." Tears pooled, ran slow. "And me?" "Live," Daenerys told him. "And teach that chains our choices." He collapsed into sobs, shoulders shaking harder than any warrior's last breath. Arya wiped her blade clean and turned away. Eyes bright. Winter's first blizzard rolled in the next dawn, smothering camps in white muffling hush. Work halted except at Deadgrove, where Sam directed excavation around the pit. Bran arrived in a wicker sledge drawn by shaggy mountain goats, his chair lashed with sealskin. He clasped Daenerys' wrist when she greeted him. "Emberglass pulses," he said. "If frost below learns Dragon's Guard above, it may lash out." Daenerys frowned. "So Drogon provokes it. Or balances it," Bran said cryptically. "Bring him here." She whistled skyward. Moments later, rushing wind heralded Drogon's descent. Snow exploded outward as he landed within the grove's circumference. The pit's icy rim steamed at his nearness. Ember light flared again. Steady, almost rhythmic. Heartbeat answering heartbeat. Sam whispered, "They resonate." Bran laid a hand on Drogon's scales. His eyes rolled white. He fell into a trance. All watched, breath held. Minutes stretched. Suddenly Bran gasped, jerking back. "It's a knot," he croaked. Pupils dilated. Fire and frost entangled. Dragon hearts below, frozen by impossible cold, still alive. They dream. They yearn for sky, Dragons above anchor them. Nectar and Sal. Jon steadied Bran. Can we keep them dormant? Not forever, Bran murmured. They will wake or die, and if they die, the frost escapes. Daenerys' voice softened. A cycle without end. Unless, Sam ventured, we merge the knot, guide both forces into harmony instead of opposition. Tyrion raised brows. And how does one persuade ancient, half-living dragon hearts and primeval frost to hold hands and sing? Sam swallowed. A ritual of balance. Living dragon blood, sacred weirwood sap, emberglass. Words of union in the oldest tongue. It might work. Nadarso. Jon met Daenerys' gaze. Living dragon blood. Yours. And yours, she countered. Half Targaryen, half Stark, a bridge. He accepted at once. Then we do it. They prepared for 7 nights. Sam brewed ink from midnight berries and pulverized emberglass, etching runes of coalescence onto weirwood slats carved by Bran's directions. Arya fetched sap from the heart tree of Winterfell, returning starlit, face pale but resolute. Grey worms stationed unsullied in a silent perimeter. Spears grounded but first, symbols of defense, not aggression. Sansa arrived to witness, along with Gilly, Tyrion, Davos, and dozens of clansfolk. No banners flew. Only plain linen fluttered above the snow. On the longest night, under an aurora shimmering green and violet, Jon and Daenerys stood at the pit's rim, palms cut shallow. Their mingled blood dripped onto emberglass shards glowing amber. Bran's voice, echoing from depths of time, chanted a binding song taught by ravens and remembered by trees. Sam and Tyrion recited translations in unsteady unison. The ground trembled. Frost within the pit boiled into white mist. Drogon spread his wings, exhaling fire just enough to color the steam gold without igniting. The aurora swirled overhead, bending toward the pit like celestial vines. Jon felt heat and cold crash inside his chest, as if dragon flame and wall wind fought around his heart. Daenerys swayed but remained upright, eyes luminous. Their blood seeped, smoking where it touched emberglass. Amber glow brightened to molten orange. Then, deep below, a thunderous crack, followed by silence so profound the snow-laden trees seemed to hold their breath. The mist thinned. The amber glow faded to gentle honey. The icy rim no longer smoked. Bran opened his eyes. The knot is woven anew, he said, voice trembling with exhaustion. Neither frozen nor aflame. It rests. A sigh of relief rippled across the gathered. Jon caught Daenerys as her knees buckled. Drogon roared once, not in anger but triumph, a roar that rolled across valleys, echoed off mountains, and scattered clouds to reveal a sky pale with coming dawn. Snow melted faster than it fell that week. Streams flushed clear. Shepherd Mela returned with word that lambs were born healthy again. The last Hearth Valley smoked with hearthfires and songs once more. White Harbor celebrated their midwinter fair early. Stalls sold fried shellfish and mulled wine. Jon and Daenerys walked among the crowds unescorted. Children tugged Daenerys' sleeves, begging dragon stories. She told them tales of Drogon chasing clouds, of Rhaegal racing comets, never of war. Jon sampled every vendor's cider until Tyrion pronounced him an honorary Braavosi for tolerance alone. In the great hall that night, Sansa raised a horn. To the world's first year without a throne, she toasted. May we keep mending it, season after season. Horns clashed, laughter pealed. Corran Whiteflame, face healed into a patchwork of scar and new hope, stood shyly at the edge until Davos beckoned him to sit. He accepted, bewildered, then found himself drawn into conversation with a Mormont blacksmith about forging plows from melted spearheads. Soon the pair were sketching designs on bread crusts, arguing cheerfully. Bran slept, drained by the ritual, but his ravens flitted overhead, watchful. That night, Jon and Daenerys lay in a feather-stuffed bed beneath tallow candles. Snow sifted outside the window, gentle now, more ornament than menace. Daenerys traced a circle on Jon's chest. We have no more crowns to shatter, but we still have roads to travel. The charter needs guardians, not rulers. Jon kissed her fingertips. Then we'll be wanderers. Let the world decide every generation who stewards next. She hesitated, then spoke softly. Sam says our blood mingled with emberglass may have woven more than balance. It may have quickened fertility once thought lost to Targaryens. He propped on one elbow, eyes meeting hers. Are you? Not yet. She smiled. But perhaps soon? He pressed his forehead to hers, wonder flooding him. A child under no crown. She laughed, quiet and bright. A child who will learn history's mistakes before taking a single step. Jon closed his eyes, breathing her nearness. We'll build them a world where choosing kindness is easier than choosing fear. Outside, Ghost howled at a moon haloed in rainbow ice, and Drogon answered from some distant roost. Two guardians of night and flame, singing lullabies to a world, newly mended, infinitely unfinished. Spring crept sooner than calendars predicted. The wall, long cracked and sagging, began to host wildflower tufts in its crevices, blue snowbells staking fragile claims on ancient ice. Rangers patrolling its length reported no whites, no strange lights, only the occasional polar bear roaming beyond frostfangs. It seemed the darkness had truly retreated, though experienced men still sharpened swords, for memory's sake. Sam returned to Old Town to found a college of Concord, dedicated to studying harmony between magic and mundane craft. Maesters, children of the forest, Dothraki Jacquot philosophers, even former red priests convened in cloisters once reserved for lords. They quarreled over everything. Sam grinned through every quarrel. Tyrion established itinerant tribunals that traveled by barge, rendering judgments in canal-side markets before crowds of fishermen and spicemongers. Justice delivered under full daylight, with no dais higher than a barrel. He joked that he'd traded the hand's pin for a gavel of driftwood. The world laughed, but listened. Grey Worm and the Unsullied trained northern youths in shield discipline, learning in turn from spearwives how to track elk and climb iced cliffs with axes. Cultural exchange grew as natural as breathing. Arya sailed west of Westeros on a slim sloop named Storm Dancer. She promised to return with maps of continents unimagined. No one doubted her. Sansa oversaw a spring council in Tharsis, where shipping disputes with the Triarchy finally resolved through shared tolls rather than seized cargoes. She wrote to Jon that compromise tasted like vinegar until sweetened by relief. Jon and Daenerys journeyed constantly, Dragonstone to Braavos, Loreth to Lies, sleeping in shepherd huts, temples, occasionally palaces offered by hosts, eager for their presence. Wherever they stayed, they refused the lordly bed, choosing instead to dine at common tables, listen to grievances, mediate when necessary, step aside when not. Their legend transformed, not conquerors, but keepers of equilibrium. Some called them the twin comets, referencing the streaking meteors on the night of the ritual. Others named them simply Jon and Dany, neighbors of every coast. One midsummer eve, in a meadow outside River Run, Daenerys felt the first quickening in her belly. She gripped Jon's hand, tears bright. He kissed her, then knelt to kiss the life stir beneath linen. Drogon, perched on a nearby hill, rumbled approvingly, a sound deeper than thunder yet gentler than thunder ever dared. Word spread swift as wind. Many expected festivals of dynasty, coronations, old reflexes resurfacing. Instead, Jon penned a missive. Children are gifts, not heirs. They inherit responsibility, not sovereignty. The message baffled some, inspired more. Time turned. Years later, on a morning of gull shrieks and salt spray, Jon stood atop the lighthouse newly built at the entrance of Queenstown Harbor, though no one called it Queenstown anymore. The charter had renamed it Hearthlight. He wore a wool shirt patched at elbows. His hair blew silver at the temples. Children chased kites along the quay below. Footsteps thudded the spiral stair. Daenerys emerged, cheeks flushed from the climb, their young daughter riding on her hip, copper-ringed irises ablaze with mischief. Daenerys set the girl down. She sprinted to the parapet, craned over to watch dolphins roll in glistening arcs. Careful, Jon cautioned, though he knew dragon spawn feared little. Daenerys joined him, leaning against the sun-warmed stone. "Rhaella wants to see the world," she said. "She already has," Jon smiled. "Every port we've anchored in sang her name." "Shall outgrow our sails soon enough," Daenerys said wistfully. "Wants to read at Sam's college next spring. 11, and ready to dissect prophecy." Jon exhaled. "Let her. Each mind free enough to question adds mortar to what we're building." Below, work crews laid keel for a vessel 3 times larger than any trade cog, destined for the far west where Arya's charts spoke of green archipelagos and crimson deserts. Rhaella pressed her face through battlements, eyes bright. Daenerys watched their daughter, then turned to Jon. "We did not end crowns," she mused. "We replaced them with journeys." Jon brushed wind-tangled hair from her face. "Journeys are crowns that fit all heads." She kissed him, laughter dancing in her throat. "Philosopher wolf." He grinned. "Dragon dreamer." Gulls wheeled above, free as every promise soldered into the charter's living ink. Far north, Deadgrove Wood stood quiet. Far south, the stepstones bustled with shared markets. Across the seas, ships bore wheat where wine once flowed, books where swords once glinted. The world, never perfect, never finished, breathed. Its pulse a mosaic of quarrels and cooperations, of frost and flame bound not in war but in wary embrace. Jon looked out over the harbor, at sails blooming like lilies on still water, and felt in his bones the hum of that balance. The horizon beckoned endless, a line ever beyond reach, yet always visible. Beside him, Daenerys whispered something to their daughter and pointed at the farthest glint of ship. Rhaella squealed delight, spinning to share the vision with her father. He knelt, opened his arms, she bounded into them, laughter echoing against the lighthouse stones. Daenerys knelt too, enclosing them both, and for a heartbeat Jon sensed within their embrace the same knot of opposites he had felt at Deadgrove. Heat and chill, shadow and sparkle, all woven, resting in fragile harmony. "I wonder where that ship sails," Rhaella breathed. "Wherever people still dream," Daenerys answered. Jon held them close. The sky above unfurled in shades of dawn, and the waves below drummed tireless rhythm. Somewhere distant, Drogon soared, carving arcs of freedom through tropospheric heights. And on every shore, people woke to toil, to argue, to love, to mend anew. A world without a throne did not mean a world without struggle. It meant a world where struggle belonged to all, where victory tasted of bread and laughter, not ash and iron. Jon lifted his daughter onto his shoulders. She whooped at the sudden height. Daenerys laughed and tickled Jon's ribs, then turned her gaze east, recalling deserts, wastes, and flames long since banked, but never truly forgotten. "Shall we sail again?" she asked. Jon adjusted Rhaella's grip on his forehead. "The world's wide, and our feet still itch." Daenerys' smile blazed brighter than any crown. "Then onward, wolf." "Forward, dragon," he answered. They descended the lighthouse spiral, steps ringing hollow, hearts beating full, ready to follow the wind's next whim. Below, workmen saluted, sailors cheered, and somewhere nearby Corin Whiteflame hammered a plow blade into shape while children watched, learning how steel can both wound and nourish, depending on the hand. Journey upon journey, balance upon balance, an unending story, yet each chapter newly written by readers who refused to surrender the quill to any tyrant or fate. And in the rustle of sails, the roar of distant dragons, and the hush of snow-melt rivers, the world carried forward the vow born on a shattered throne. No crown but conscience. No ruler but reason. No legacy but the endless work of keeping peace alive. Sea mists rose like pale ghosts around the hull of the windward Rime as it slipped out of Hearthlight Harbor, masts groaning under a full press of canvas. Jon stood at the forecastle rail with the salt stinging his cheeks, watching the lighthouse dwindle until its bronze beacon winked once, twice, and vanished behind a curtain of brine-gray haze. Dawn tinted the sky rose and primrose at the horizon. The ship's wake foamed white before being swallowed by the steel-dark sea. The same sea on which Arya had once vanished. The same sea that now called to his daughter. Rhaella darted up the companionway, eyes bright beneath the hood of her wool cloak. She was 13, long-limbed, with Jon's gray eyes and the streak of silver in Daenerys' hair glimmering through her own dark waves. She had coaxed the ship's master to let her climb the ratlines at first bell. Pinpricks of tar still dotted her palms. Jon touched her shoulder to steady her excitement. "Steady feet, pup," he murmured. "The deck can buck if the wind freshens." She grinned. "I'll grow sea legs by dusk, father. The master promised to show me how to read wind veins." Jon chuckled, unable to keep stern. "Just give your mother no cause to snatch you off the ropes. She fears storms more than dragons." "In this time down dead." "Mother fears nothing." Rhaella's voice held the certainty of youth. "Besides, Drogon will watch us from the clouds soon." Jon sobered. "Hell, keep distant. A shadow overhead can turn friends into fretful strangers if seen uninvited." "I know," she sighed, as if repeating a well-worn verse. "But still, I like knowing he's there." "So do I," Jon thought, glancing skyward. The day was too young for dragon silhouettes. Wisps of vapor drifted lazily instead. Yet he felt Drogon's presence rumbling somewhere over the horizon, a comfort and a warning both. A bell clanged twice. Sailors bustled, hauling braces. Daenerys emerged from below decks, cloak flaring. She met Jon's eyes, smiled, then turned to survey the sea. "No gulls this far already," she noted. "Good sign. Fewer shoals." "Or fewer fish," Jon teased. She elbowed him lightly and drew Rhaella into her side. The voyage's purpose lay 2,000 nautical miles west, across waters that chartmakers once colored green with speculative islands. Arya's storm dancer had returned 3 seasons prior bearing silk maps of a new continent far beyond the Sunset Sea, a land she named Talanth. Its coasts curled like a double crescent around an inland sea, the Sigillan Gulf, where cities of glazed stone stood under lavender skies. Arya's tales told of sky singers who rode winds in feathered gliders, of orchards planted in geometric spirals visible only from cliffs, and of scholars who measured time by the heartbeat of lightning that traveled through crystals. She had brought barter gifts, quartz flutes that hummed at a touch, and russet grains that cooked into bread tasting faintly of honeyed chestnut. She spoke too of tensions beneath Talon's grace. Inequality thrived between high towers and thorn forests where nomads camped. Still, the realm seemed neither empire nor fiefdom, another society groping toward equilibrium. When Arya asked if the Charter's promise extended past the known world, Daenerys answered yes without hesitation. Jon agreed, but privately he feared meddling too soon, feared repeating the blemished patronage of conquerors past. Arya laughed at his caution. "You sailed south to end slavery and east to strike pacts with city-states of coin," she'd said, eyes glinting. "Now sail west and listen. If they need help, offer. If they don't, learn." So the voyage began. Daenerys, Jon, Rhaella. Tyrion cajoled from tribunal duty. Maester Sam sent again by the Concord to study Talanth's sky crystals. Corin Whiteflame as goodwill envoy for those once misled, and a retinue of scholars, farmers, sailors' guild representatives, and 20 unsullied to guard the scholars' chests and the farmers' seed grain. Grey Worm stayed behind to command the shield fleet. Bran remained at Winterfell's Hearttree, though ravens flew with them. By second week the Rime caught the westward current beyond the summer rip, sails fat, hull-slicing waves smooth as hammered tin. Rhaella practiced compass readings with Tyrion each afternoon. Daenerys quizzed linguists on Talanth dialects. Sam compared stars to Arya's charts, noting subtle skew that suggested the world slightly larger than Maesters once believed. 3 nights out of harbor, a squall rose black and abrupt. The Rime heeled and corkscrewed through swells tall as keeps. Rhaella clung to a belaying pin as spray blasted the deck. Jon secured lines beside crew, soaked to bone. Lightning flashed turquoise and sea mist. Thunder rolled like stone avalanches. Daenerys stood at the quarterdeck rail, hair lashing, eyes closed, murmuring Valyrian cadences. She did not call Drogon. Storms were part of ocean's covenant. But she voiced calm over panic, and panic yielded. The squall crossed astern by dawn, leaving a hush broken only by dripping rigging and the creak of strained timbers. When sun rose, They found a tangle of driftwood knuckled against port bow, mast fragments, oars snapped, and a single longboat overturned. Corin Whiteflame ordered grapnels thrown gently. They righted the boat, and found its sides painted with azure spirals unfamiliar. Beneath the benches lay a sodden parchment sealed in wax shaped like twin crescents, Arya's symbol for Talon. The letter, written in a brisk almond ink script, spoke of crisis. A rift widening between Talanth city councils and nomadic Thornkind tribes who roamed the Hinterbarrens. A mediation moot had been called at Windcarve Mesa, but factions armed with stormglass spears threatened bloodshed. Arya beseeched Jon and Daenerys to hasten. Wolves and dragons lend steady shadow until their own law takes root. Daenerys folded the letter slowly. Arya seldom seeks help, she murmured. If she does now, the wound must be deep. Jon traced the seal's ridges. We'll raise every stitch of canvas. They did. Wynn answered. A fortnight later, pale cliffs loomed, chalk white rising from cerulean waters, gullhawks wheeling. The Rime anchored in the Bay of Spires where limestone needles jutted like frozen sails. Canoes approached, paddled by lean figures in cloaks of woven reed. Their faces bore swirling ochre sigils. Their palms were empty of weapons. The foremost touched heart, lip, brow, then spoke in halting common learned from Arya Dadwa. Welcome, travelers across setting deep. I am Kesh of the Dawntide pilots. Sister Wolf sent signs of your wings. Come. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sam, and Rhaella boarded canoes, skimming over cobalt water that glowed faint from bioluminescent algae. They disembarked upon a beach of glassy grains. Kesh whistled, and spiral-horned beasts, half antelope, half goat, trotted from palm shadows with platform saddles. The party mounted, ascending switchback trails toward Windcarve Mesa. The mesa dominated the horizon, a colossal slab of rock cleft by wind, rim fringed in stone feathers. On its summit swarmed tents, silk pavilions of council delegates gleaming alongside hide-strip teepees of Thornkind elders. In the middle soared a spire of polished quartz, a neutral beacon called the Resonant Pillar. Each dawn it vibrated when struck by sun, thrumming like a tuning fork audible miles away. They reached the summit at dusk. Hearth fires dotted the plain. Arya strode from the largest teepee, shorter than Jon remembered, hair cropped close, eyes keen. She embraced them with quick fierceness, then gestured toward the encampments. 2 moons I've argued them to truce, she said, voice low. But yesterday a council envoy was found with his throat cut. Each side blames the other. They're coiled to strike at dawn. She looked at Rhaella. Didn't expect you, little starling. Rhaella lifted her chin. I steer my own wind now, Aunt. Arya snorted a laugh. So you do. Sam asked about stormglass spears. Arya explained. Outcroppings of fulgurite, sand fused by lightning, littered the Thorn Barren. Fractured into shards and hafted, they hummed with static charge, arcing sparks strong enough to stun a man at spear point. Thornkind wielded them first for hunting, now reluctantly as arms when council settlers fenced migration routes. Last season a drought dried the steppe. Water rights treaties broke down. One border skirmish fed into rumor and resentment. When the council began quarrying fulgurite for city trade, Thornkind feared resource theft of sacred heritage. Windcarve Moot convened to resolve, but sabotage threatened perfidy. Jon absorbed the tale and asked, who benefits from fracture? Arya's gaze drifted to the shaded edge of tents where merchants from coastal city Vineloom clustered around crates. Trade houses, she said. They covet stormglass. With war, they buy at discount. Daenerys exhaled, old memories of slavers' bay flickering. We've trodden this path before, she mused. Profiteers kindling war to fatten purses. That night they addressed the assembled stakeholders inside the open circle, an arena of stone benches under a vaulted sky pulsing with astral ribbons unfamiliar to Westerosi eyes. Torches ringed the dais. Thornkind sat on mats of plaited reeds, their chieftain Lara Windthorn thin and wiry, gray braids tipped with carved bone. Across, the Sigilon councillors wore robes of shimmering shell lace, led by Magistrate Velas Orna, a man with aquiline features and calculating calm. Jon spoke first, recounting Westeros' long night of crowns, and the forging of a charter that bound blade to conscience. He spoke not as king, but as witness to failure and to arduous repair. Daenerys followed, confessing her own path of fire and redemption, how dragon and throne melted together beneath consequence, how power guarded by fear devours itself. Tyrion added cautionary humor about treasury ledgers soaked in blood. Sam offered scholarship on climate cycles, predicting drought relief within 2 seasonal turns, making the quarrel over water a temporary scourge, not a generational doom. Yet words alone faltered. Lyra Winthorne spat into the dust, voice like flint. You speak of no crowns, yet dragons shadow your sails. We wield stormglass to defend water. Your foreigners would quarry it to fill coffers. Where is trust? Magistrate Velas, folded robe sleeves. The council honors tradition but cannot allow nomads to roam unchecked. Kropsteiwen und hooves, stamp, seedlings. We offered designated corridors, refused. Mepsinatiu. Corridors fenced by your patrols, Lyra retorted. Corridors narrow as strangling nooses. Tension crackled. Rhaella sat behind her parents, heart pounding. She sensed their argument sliding into tired grooves. Without thinking, she rose. Voice trembling. She said, Where I come from, direwolves once ranged every forest, dragons soared without leash, and men called them monsters. My parents taught me monsters are born when wonder is caged. The council cages Thornkind. Thornkind ready spears. Both forget the wonder of this land. Lightning stones singing, water carving canyons, wind painting these mesas pink at dawn. I'm no queen, but I am child of clans and city both. Let me walk Thorn Barren with both sides. Not tomorrow, tonight. We'll listen. Perhaps the land itself will answer. Mimamisternen. Silence hushed the arena. Joan's pulse hammered, proud and afraid. Daenerys' eyes gleamed. Lyra studied Rhaella lit by fire glow. Young blood speaks truth sometimes unfiltered by fear, she said. Will Counselor Orna's kin, brave knight win too? Velas inclined his head. My son Joran will accompany. Neutral outsiders may temper passions. So, it was settled. 4 youths would venture. Rhaella, Joran Orna, a lanky boy of 15, shy behind gold-rimmed spectacles. Timir, Lyra's nephew, broad-shouldered and taciturn, and Yiva, Arius apprentice cartographer, lithe and sun-bronzed. Arya insisted on joining discreetly from distance. The moon climbed, lavender against a quilt of unfamiliar constellations. The foursome descended winding goat trails into the Thorn Barren, Arya trailing ghost quiet. Shrubs crackled underfoot, nocturnal beetles glimmered like embers. Rhaella felt currents prickling across her skin, static charge humming near stormglass shards embedded in sand. She knelt, brushed dust, and glimpsed threads of lightning fossilized mid-fork beneath a translucent sheath. Wonder indeed. They reached a dry ravine. Wind sighed. Joran consulted a brass hygrometer, frowning. Humidity spiked briefly, then fell. Timir knelt, touched sand, sniffed. Moisture pocket exhaled, he muttered. Stormglass vines lie near water seams. Siphon dew at night. Yeva sketched. Sudden caw rang. Arrows thudded into sand ahead. Shaft feathers dyed merchant green. From shadows leapt masked figures. Vinaloom sellswards. Their leader barked, "Seize hostages," but a wolf whistle sliced the night. Arya burst, sword flashing moonlit steel. 2 sellswards dropped before breath escaped lungs. Rhaella shouted as Joran stumbled, glasses flying. Timir hurled a storm-glass spear. It crackled, stunning another attacker. Rhaella felt fear funnel into focus. She snatched a fallen bough, knocked arrow, drew as Jon had taught. Years at practice paid. The shaft pinned a sellsword's breeches to rock. Yeva swung a staff low, crumpling knees. Within heartbeats, the ambush faltered. Surviving mercenaries fled into scrub. Arya wiped blade on cloak. Merchants escalate, she hissed. They wanted captives to ignite blame. She retrieved a satchel from one wounded assailant, documents showing payments from a consortium in Vinaloom to sow discord, timed to coincide with next day's moot. Tamir growled. Proof for council and tribes. War ends tonight if honor lives. But Raella knelt beside stunned mercenary, gasping on his back. She pressed cloth to his bleeding brow. Honor lives when mercy breathes, she whispered, then bound his wound. They returned to Mesa at dawn, bearing prisoners and documents. The open circle convened under crimson sunrise. Evidence unfurled, gasps and curses rippled. Vinaloom's delegates slunk pale. Tribal chants rumbled like thunder. Yet vengeance threatened. Thornkind demanded blood price. Council demanded extradition, the charter's rule. Violence simmered anew. Daenerys stepped forward, palms raised. Jon stood beside her. She proposed a test of trust. Thornkind would release prisoners to neutral charter tribunals sailing with the Rime, on condition Vinaloom cedes sole custody of Stormglass quarries to a joint stewardship council with equal Thornkind seats. Sigilin Council would guarantee water sharing, opening reservoirs during drought. In exchange for migration corridor, schedules agreed by Thornkind assemblies. All bound by charter arbitration, equal voice. Raella added suggestion, dedicating half Stormglass yield to forge lightning rods ringing reservoirs, preventing future drought fires. Sam endorsed feasibility. Lyra and Velis exchanged glances heavy with responsibility. At length both nodded. Formal accords were inscribed on thin mica sheets and signed beneath humming resonant pillar. The pillar's tone deepened at each signature, as though the land itself concurred. When last pen scratched, the tone mellowed into a sustained chord that drifted across mesas, echoing harmony. That dusk festival fires lit the windcarve rim. Nomad flutes fluttered with city brass horns. Food shared, cactus stew, sea-salted figs, honey cakes baked in sunstone ovens. Tyrion toasted Raella, calling her little mediator riding wider winds than grown lords stare. She flushed, but pride glinted. Days followed of rebuilding. Corin coordinated joint patrols, policing Fulgurite thieves. Joran and Raella collaborated on reservoir lightning rods, fusing Stormglass tips, riser tall. Yeva mapped corridors with Tamir, etching sacred pilgrimage sites onto council charts. Arya vanished one dawn, leaving note, Wolf's curiosity still hungry, sailing south along Crystal Coast. Raella kept the parchment tucked in belt pouch like talisman. On the 10th sunset, Jon climbed the mesa alone. The sky blazed marmalade. Below, campfires flickered. He contemplated how each journey reopened responsibility. The charter's dream demanded ceaseless tending, as Bran had foreseen. Daenerys joined him, slipping hands into his. You worry we plant seeds faster than we harvest lessons, she guessed. I worry wonder becomes burden, he murmured. Our daughter leaps into danger before her voice deepens. Daenerys chuckled softly. She is blood of wolf and dragon. She'll find balance like we did, through stumbles, not shelter. The world will test her, sharpen her grace. Nenor. Jon exhaled, tension eased. He kissed her brow. We should sail north to Vinaloom, ensure merchant lords accept new accord. She agreed. So the Rime embarked again, Joran opting to accompany as envoy, Thornkind observers aboard. Winds favored. Crystal-lined cliffs marched along coast. On third night, lookout sighted glow ahead, turquoise pulses beneath waves. Crew steered closer. Below surface lay sprawling reef of hexagonal plates of glass, each pane flickering as bioluminescent fish darted. Sam theorized volcanic vents fueling plankton. Raella insisted to dive. Jon reluctantly permitted with line tether. She plunged, body sleek, hair swirling silver. Through goggles, she saw shapes beneath reef. Towers of coral fused with fulgurite pillars. Doors carved with spirals identical to Thornkind sigils for sunrise. She surfaced, breathless, describing the submerged ruin. Sam's quill scratched excited. But when they anchored near Vinaloom's breakwater, tension thick again. Dock strikes paralyzed grain loading. Merchant lords feuded with labor guilds emboldened by charter rights. Some hired freebooters to pressure, others sought negotiation. The council hall's marble steps bore chalk slogans, No charter, no cargo. Jon and Daenerys requested audience. Merchant magnate Sarek Ulian greeted them in an inner chamber lined with gold leaf maps. He welcomed accords in principle, but balked at ceding quarry rights, citing trade contracts, investors. Daenerys recognized greed's cadence too well. She outlined charters, arbitration pathways, fines, and, if necessary, embargo. Sarek scoffed, believing Vinaloom essential to Sigilin export routes. That evening, gray-sailed warships of Vinaloom's private navy slipped from harbor, aiming for Thornkind coast. Arya's reports of freebooter buildup proved. But Rhaella, stargazing on top deck, spotted their sails against moon-washed horizon. She alerted her parents. The shield fleet was oceans away, only the Rime and 2 small Sigilin cutters present. Jon weighed choices. Daenerys faced him. We swore no dragonfire in war, unless charter itself was threatened. This is threat. Jon nodded. She called Drogon. He arrived as silhouette against crescent moon, landing on Rime's aft castle with deck-splitting weight. Sailors cowered yet trusted. Jon kissed Daenerys, then climbed onto Drogon behind her. First time in years he rode. Drogon launched, wings booming. They pursued at sky level. Vinaloom warships drove under black pennants. Daenerys signaled. Drogon dived, banking so wind sheer rattled masts. She projected voice in Valyrian amplified by dragon roar. Turn back, or drift ash to sea. Captain decks erupted in chaos. Ballistae were loaded. Bolts hissed upward. Drogon veered. Fire withheld. But one burning jar of pitch launched, trailing spark. It struck his flank, flame-licking scale. Pain ignited reflex. Drogon exhaled a ring of fire across water. Steam explosion, not aimed at hulls. The shockwave rocked ships, extinguished jugs, snapped spars but spared lives. Fear triumphed. Warships wheeled, sails luffing, retreating toward harbor. At dawn, merchants gathered furious. Jon addressed them before charred spars piled on quay. Your prophet nearly birthed war, he said, voice hoarse. Charter fines triple for armed breach. Vinaloom stands to lose trade lanes for 5 years. Sarek Ulian spat but signed surrender terms, forced by guild strikes and public outcry. Work began converting private warships to grain carriers. Striking longshoremen won council seats. Thornkind representatives docked stormglass shipments under joint seal. The city's mood pivoted from resentment to cautious optimism. Helped when Drogon circled harbor carrying Daenerys and Rhaella, who distributed bread baked with Thornkind chestnut grain, a symbolic sharing. Months drifted into a year. The Rhine voyaged along Talent's coasts, weaving charter threads, mediating coral fisher territories, establishing scholarship exchanges between Concord College and Crystal Academies, drafting maritime safety pacts, guided by stormglass lightning rods. Tyrion joked he'd aged 10 years but felt lighter for it. Sam shipped crates of reef fungi promising cures for lung rot. Corin trained mixed crews to patrol without flags of conquest. Rhaella thrived, absorbing dialects, charting skies. She and Joran grew close, debating ethics, stargazing hours. Jon observed, heart stirred by paternal worry, yet saw respect in the boy's gaze, unwavering. Daenerys teased Jon's protectiveness. A message arrived by Eagle from Bran. Tremors in far north cracked an ice shelf, releasing a glacier-entombed Leviathan skeleton, fused with shards similar to emberglass. Magic flux increasing, monitoring advised. Jon sighed, balance forever restless. He drafted reply promising return after talent stabilization. Daenerys Wayin. 2 seasons later, the Rhine prepared eastbound voyage. Windcarve Accord had endured. Thornkind caravans escorted council engineers building wind-catch irrigation across steppe. Vinaloom's merchant guild partnered seedlings export. Lightning rod ring glimmered at reservoir shores. Farewell ceremonies unfolded. Lyra gifted Jon a stormglass totem humming gentle. Velis entrusted Daenerys with scroll codifying joint stewardship. Arya reappeared, grinning, bearing a compass carved from Skysinger crystal for Rhaella. At twilight the resonant pillars sang, a farewell chord descending like sunset itself. On deck, Raella stood between Jon and Daenerys, as Misas faded astern. "Home," Jon said, though the word felt malleable. Daenerys squeezed their daughter's hand. "Home in motion," she replied. Raella's eyes shimmered. Weeks turned open sea calm. One star-strewn night, Jon and Daenerys lay on deck, cloaks for pillows. Raella tended midnight watch. Waves whispered, hull lullabies. "I sometimes wonder," Jon murmured. "Will history recall us as meddlers?" Daenerys traced constellations. "History will recall a tapestry. We weave one thread. Others will weave over or unravel as needed. The pattern is theirs." "Nai, Dede," he breathed, content. "And our next thread. We meet, Bran's tremors. Balance still calls." She laced fingers with his. "But first, let's sail slow enough to watch our girl navigate by stars she named herself." He smiled. "Slow sail it is." Morning revealed Drogon gliding parallel, great wings stirring scented spray. Raella waved to him, laughter ringing. Corin strummed a thornkind string harp. Tyrion scribbled treatise on the economics of wonder. Sam sorted sea crystals. Sailors sang shanties stitched with new words. East wind carried them homeward, across sunlit swells that glimmered as if the world's heart beat beneath each crest. No throne guided them, only horizon's promise, a line perpetually retreating, perpetually inviting, reminding all who sailed after that power lay not in crowns, but in the courage to journey wherever justice and curiosity demanded, and to mend the sails when inevitable storms tore them. So their ship cut the water, trailing wake enough for others to follow, yet free enough that each who did would choose their own stars to steer by, their own balances to keep, their own stories to tell under skies forever expanding with possibility. Dawn spread a thin saffron gauze across the waves, and the windward Rhine plowed eastward, its timbers humming with the memory of distant shores. The ocean was calm as a held breath, slick as oil where the sun's first seam stitched brightness into the horizon. Crewmen moved lightly in the hush. No shouted orders, only the faint rasp of a swab across planks, the creak of rigging settling into an easy rhythm. Jon Snow rose from his hammock before the morning bell. Barefoot, he padded up the companionway to the foredeck. Scents of salt and tar mingled on the cooling air. He breathed in, trying to taste home somewhere on that wind. It was there, faint but certain, like the smell of pine smoke carried down from the north when all the world felt frozen. He leaned on the rail, palms rough against the salt-pitted brass, and let his thoughts drift. Behind him, softer footsteps feathered across the deck. "Couldn't sleep either?" Daenerys asked. He shook his head without turning. "The sea's too gentle. Feels like it's waiting for something." She joined him, silver gold hair whipping into his shoulder. "It is. Every calm bears the seed of the next storm." Her eyes searched the brightening heavens. "Drogon's somewhere on the wing. I dreamt him circling, restless." Jon finally faced her, studying the tired flecks of worry that never quite left her gaze. "The raven from Bran still troubles you." It wasn't a question. "It troubles us all," she said. "A glacier cracking open to spill what lies buried is warning enough. But Bran writes of bones fused with ember glass, of pulses and dead marrow." She hugged herself against a chill only she could feel. "We bought time in the Thorn Barrens, but balance tilts elsewhere again." He drifted closer, touching her elbow. "We'll steady it. Together." The words were the same promise they had shared 100 times, but each repetition soothed them both, like runes carved deeper by every storm past. Below, the main hatch grated open. Raella's dark silver hair bobbed upward as she climbed, cheeks pink from the galley's baking heat. She carried 3 steaming cups on a small tray, spiced cacao swirled with thornkind honey cream. She nudged her parents with a grin that held more dawn than sky itself. "You'll need this," she said, offering them mugs. "Master Hobb swears another calm means we'll turn sails at midday. Less wind, more toil." Jon accepted the drink, ruffling her hair. "And how does our navigator's apprentice plan to spend the lull?" "Chart correction," she answered. "Joran thinks the last set of bearings drifted half a degree north. We'll recalculate noon marks." She sipped and added shyly, "Maybe later we'll try the quadrant adjustment Tyrion sketched." Daenerys arched an eyebrow at Jon behind the rim of her cup. Their daughter had grown into a force as subtle and inevitable as tidewater, keen to learn from anyone, eager to apply it before nightfall. "See that you run the numbers twice," Jon said. "The open sea forgives fewer errors than land." Rhaella rolled her eyes in familiar mock exasperation, but her smile lingered as she padded aft. When the sun rode a handspan higher, Tyrion Lannister emerged on deck wearing a faded green coat, his half-moon spectacles perched precariously on his nose. He waved a folded sheet of parchment like a banner. "Word from the cutters," he announced to no one in particular, but loud enough for all to hear. "Our kindly sailors spotted a pod of wind whales 8 leagues starboard. Massive beasts, apparently. So if we angled just so," he spun the parchment, which was less a letter than a hastily drawn fish with wings, "we might catch both sight and wind in one generous turn of fortune." Jon raised a skeptical brow. "You bribed the lookout again, didn't you?" "Bribed? I prefer encouraged through enlightened compensation. And I owe the man a jug of fig brandy. Worth it if Rhaella's charts glean something new." Tyrion tucked the paper inside his coat and leaned against the rail between them. "Any sign of the dragon?" "Not yet," Daenerys said, though she lifted her gaze again as if hearing a far-off timbre. Below, Jorn and Rhaella pored over instruments spread atop a cask. Samwell Tarly stood nearby, lecturing on celestial declination while wiping sweat from his brow. An academic's excitement overpowering seasickness. Corin Whiteflame supervised a pair of Thornkind scouts mending a storm glass net that crackled faintly under each knot. By late morning, a silvery vapor bank rolled across the water. Fair weather still, but the stillness unnerved veteran mariners. Sails sagged. The ship's forward momentum eased to a sulk. Captain Mara stiffened at the wheel, scanning for any breath of breeze. Rhaella scurried up the ratlines with Jorn. They perched high atop the mainmast, spyglass trading between them. Minutes stretched. Then her shout floated down. "Whales off starboard quarter." Jon hurried to the rail with Daenerys, and saw first one, then 7 arching backs rise from the mirror-flat sea. They weren't whales as Westerosi knew them. Golden-gray leviathans, each the length of a castle wall, glided just below the surface, translucent fins unfurling like gossamer wings. Every so often the fins beat downward, stirring cat-soft ripples. With each pulse, a warm updraft billowed across the water, an invisible thermal that swelled sails just enough. The crew gasped, half in wonder, half superstition. Tyrion yanked a quill from behind his ear and scribbled feverishly in a pocketbook. "Wind whales indeed," Sam marveled aloud. "They generate localized thermals to aid migration. Extraordinary." Daenerys stared, entranced. "They guide us." Jon felt the deck tremble almost imperceptibly as one whale rolled beneath the hull, ventral fins stroking lazy currents. The rime eased forward as though cradled by unseen hands. For the better part of an hour, the pod shepherded them eastward before peeling away toward deeper water, leaving the brigantine once more in calm. Sails drooped anew, but spirits soared. Even seasoned sailors laughed like children drunk on wonder. That evening, as the horizon bruised violet, a lonely call echoed from above. Drogon's silhouette streaked against dusk, wings backlit crimson by the sinking sun. He circled twice, colossal, then banked northward toward the ship's bow and vanished into gathering stars. Daenerys set her palm on Jon's arm. "He flies scouting arcs. Something draws him." Jon met her eyes. "The glacier." She nodded. 5 days later, the rime entered colder waters. Frost filmed the railings at dawn. Crew wrapped scarves around faces, though the season back home was high summer. A current sliced up from the south, wicked with unnatural chill, as if plucked from the very veins of the cracked northern ice shelf. A shriek rang from the crow's nest. Flotsam dead ahead. They hauled canvas, slowed their approach. Debris bobbed, casks, splintered spars, a half-submerged longboat punched with jagged shards of black ice. Corin dropped rope ladders, and with 2 unsullied climbed down, wading waist-deep to haul something aboard. A sailor's corpse, eyes wide, skin rimed, limbs splayed around a spear of translucent obsidian that jutted clean through his chest. Sam bent close. Frost smoked from the wound even in daylight. He scraped a sliver into a vial. It sizzled, emitting a faint, high keening like glass rubbed by a wet finger. "Not pure dragon glass," he whispered. It's fused. Ice and embers both." Daenerys' gaze hardened, just like the bones Bran described. Jon touched the dead man's eyelids closed. "We head north now. Could be survivors trapped along the ice front." He lifted his voice so all could hear. "Captain, bring us to course 341. Full canvas to the breeze these shards conjure." Rhaella appeared beside him, posture straight, but he saw worry flicker across her face. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "Balance tilts," he said, echoing Daenerys' phrase. "We tilt it back." Night fell early beneath glowering clouds. Lanterns flickered orange against the slate sky. By third watch, the lookouts called. "Lights on the water!" Jon and Daenerys emerged, wrapped in fur mantles. Ahead, faint blue flares bobbed. Lanterns strung on a cluster of ships pressed bow to stern within a crude barricade of lashed ice floes. A desperate flotilla, sails shredded, decks crowded with figures waving rags. As they neared, a hoarse cry carried, "Hold off! The frost burns spread!" Rhine's sailors bristled. Some made protective signs. Jon signaled to heave to at shouting distance. A woman in tattered captain's coat leaned over her gunwale. Her cheeks were chapped raw. Ice crystals dusted her eyelashes. "We left the Riverwind outpost 2 weeks past," she called. Something broke loose beneath the shelf. "I lost 3 deckhands to those spears before we fled. Every day the sea grows colder." Jon cupped hands. "How many souls aboard?" "Near 400, all told. We're running low on coal, fresh water gone brackish with frostbite dust." She coughed blood-flecked phlegm that steamed in the cold. Daenerys gestured. "We'll transfer supplies, evacuate injured, lower launches." Even before orders passed, Corran had the unsullied lowering boats. Thornkind scouts wrapped canvas around barrels of fresh water. Sailors craned sacks of dried fruit and barley. Sam, swaddled in fur, advised surgical isolation. The frost-burn wounds leaked volatile residue. Flame cauterized safely, but ordinary bandage would freeze to flesh. He taught crew to heat copper tongs for quick seals. Rhaella helped, fetching, dressing wounds, steady as any field nurse. Mid-rescue, a tremor shivered plates underfoot. A low boom rumbled across water. Everyone froze. Far to north, the horizon glowed eerie green. Lights rose curtains up the sky. Aurora, but pulsing too fast, flickering like a heartbeat. Tyrion murmured, "The sky looks ill." Moments later, a geyser exploded from sea's surface beyond the makeshift barricade. A column of water rimmed with diamond dust. The column collapsed into waves that hissed white vapor. In its wake floated a shard of ice, the size of a small castle. Its shape was wrong, too angular, as though chiseled. Embedded in its center lay what might have been ribs, enormous and blackened, each fused with veiny filaments of glowing amber stone. Daenerys' breath caught. "Dragon bones," she whispered. "Or cousins." Sam clutched the railing. "The glacier calved these relics, fused by the same knot we wove at Deadgrove, and now sea carries them south." On the ice, ribs began to pulse. Orange embers strobed along fissures, in cadence with the aurora overhead. The water around the shard cooled, frosting into plates that snapped outward, growing like crystal petals. Each pulse stretched the structure. Jon barked, "Cut lines, back oars, get our skiffs clear." Unsullied slashed ropes. Boats struggled against suction forming beneath debris. A second geyser erupted closer, showering brine that flash-froze midair, raining daggers. One shard speared the Rhine's mainsail, ripping canvas. Sailors yelled. Drogon roared from cloud cover, descending like wrath. He wheeled above the growing ice island, inhaled, then blasted searing flame. Fire met frost ember, steam exploded. The glowing ribs dimmed briefly. But from fissures in the ice rose shapes. Skeletal serpents forged of dead bone and glittering emberglass. They writhed free, jaws yawning, empty sockets flaring with amber flame. One lunged skyward, wings of shard lattice unfolding. Daenerys mounted the rail before Jon could stop her. "He cannot fight alone," she said. And she leapt. Drogon stooped, caught her upon his neck. He banked, flames spilling anew, fusing serpents mid-climb. Rhaella screamed after her mother, but Jon seized her hand. "We hold the ship," he said. "Trust the bond." In the tumult, lightning flickered, not from sky, but within the ice serpents themselves, arcing through stormglass veins. Bolts speared water, raising columns of steam that chilled instantly into murky hail. Corrin led crossbow lines, loosing quarrels tipped with thornkind fulgurite. Each bolt struck with a crack, discharging static that shattered smaller shards. Sam read incantations Bran had sent, Valyrian syllables braided with children's tongue, scrawled on parchment now half-sodden. He shouted them over the roar, and the amber glow inside the bones guttered, wavering. On Drogon's back, Daenerys felt the old rush of fire in her blood. She guided him between serpent coils, directing flame not to destroy but to weld, fusing bone to glass to ice, locking joints. But the serpent's cores remained, pulsing like malignant hearts. Suddenly Drogon shrieked, right wing buffeted by a blast of freezing vapor. The serpent he fought splintered a spike of ember ice that punched his flank. He faltered. Daenerys tightened her grip, whispering soothing words, urging him higher. Below, Jon saw the dragon stumble. Without pause he sprinted to the grappling rack, retrieved 2 thorn-kind spears. He shoved one into Rhaella's hands. "Aim for the orange veins. Trigger the charge on contact." Her eyes widened, but she nodded, calm. Together, they climbed the gunwale. As one serpent swept past the bow, jaws yawning to crunch timbers, Jon hurled. The spear drove deep behind the fanged skull. A blue-white flash burst, the head shattered, raining fragments. Rhaella hurled next, piercing the serpentine spine. Another shockwave splintered segments. The creature writhed, screeching without throat, then collapsed into inert ice that bobbed, harmless. Drogon rallied, blasting his foe's pierced flank. The wound Jon made exploded outward, ember shards dimmed. Serpent fell, thrashing limply, sinking. A hush descended but for crackle of cooling steam. Aurora faded, the sky's pulse slowing. Surviving debris floated quietly, stripped of malign glow. Daenerys guided Drogon to circle once, then land on the biggest shard. She dismounted, pressed her palm to fused bone. It was cooling, inert, yet she felt faint tremor like a sigh leaving. She whispered thanks, or apology, and climbed back to Drogon, returning to the rhyme. When her boots touched deck, Jon wrapped her tight. She clung, trembling with exhaustion more than fear. Around them, sailors cheered their survival. Sam approached, holding a finger-length sliver of extinguished emberglass. "Pulse gone," he reported. "Whatever animated the dead was tied to that glacier's magic. You severed it." "Damned before." Daenerys studied the shard. "Not severed. Paused. Not loosened somewhere we cannot see." Tyrion wiped ash from his brow. "Let that somewhere be far from shipping lanes." They set about repairs beneath ghostly starlight. The rescued flotilla moored against their flank, while carpenters patched sails and plugged deck holes. Injured were tended. None succumbed, though frostburn wounds seeped amber crystals that Sam carefully stored for study. As the sky paled, a raven alighted on the rail. White feathers, 3 eyes dark as midnight. "Bran's envoy tie." Sam detached its message. He read aloud. "Tremors worsen. Ice shelf breaches reveal caverns of marrow-bone hearts. Balance fracturing faster than reckoned. Seek the source at the heart of the world. All threads converge." Jon felt as if a hand squeezed his chest. Daenerys read over Sam's shoulder. Tyrion exhaled. "Heart of the world? Poet's tale." "Not to Bran," Jon said. Rhaella, face smudged with frost soot, whispered, where the first fires met the first snows. Beyond any map. Daenerys touched her daughter's cheek. Beyond, but not unreachable. Jon addressed the weary assembly. We finish repairs, escort these survivors to the nearest safe port, then steer north-northwest into uncharted water. Our course, the heart. Captain Mara swallowed but nodded. Sailors exchanged wary glances. Still they straightened spines. Through the days that followed, the Rhine sailed into latitudes where compass needles wandered, following instead a subtle tug in Drogon's flight path and Bran's ravens that leapfrogged ahead. Icebergs massed like cathedrals. Some bore veins of slumbering emberglass. None stirred again, yet tension hung taut. One moonless night, Rhaella stood at prow. Jorn joined her, handing a cloak. She clutched the rail. I hear them, she said quietly. Hear what? Songs in the water. Not words, tones, like the resonant pillar. She hummed low. The deck beneath seemed to vibrate in sympathy, faint but real. Jorn stared out, heartbeat quick. Maybe the heart sings. Maybe you're tuned to it. Rhaella turned to him, expression grave. If the heart breaks, the song becomes scream. We have to mend it, like Father said. He took her hand. Simple gesture in the freezing night. Then I'll stand with you. Weeks blurred in cold spray and shifting dread until one twilight the seas simply ended. Ahead stretched an expanse of shimmering ice. Flat, unbroken, horizon to horizon. Polished mirror reflecting roiling clouds. It held no ridges, no bergs, only stillness. Drogon refused to cross, circling uneasy. They anchored at the edge. Jon, Daenerys, Rhaella, Tyrion, Sam, Horan, Jorn, two unsullied, and a Thornkind guide disembarked, boots crunching on the ice like glass underfoot. Drogon remained ashore, watchful. The ice responded to weight with a low hum. Recognition? Warning? They marched toward an impossibly distant center. Hours passed. No curvature interrupted view. Yet eventually a glow pooled on the horizon, pale blue shot with crimson. As they neared, they saw a vast circular depression, miles wide, where ice thinned to a membrane above swirling energies. Molten light braided with darkness. At its midpoint rose a pillar of fused ice and emberglass, shuddering with each second pulse. Sam whispered, "The heart." Cracks spiderwebbed outward with every beat. Around the rim lay skeletons of innumerable creatures, mammoths, kraken, dragons, things unnamed, fused into rings like guardians slain at post. Daenerys' breath plumed silver. It frays. The knot unravels. Jon stepped forward. We mend it, the way we did at Deadgrove, but greater scale. Sam shook his head. Dragon blood and weirwood sap won't cover this. We need more. Ice willing to temper fire, fire willing to relent, and a living tether between. Rhaella's gaze fixed on the pillar, eyes luminous. I can feel the song. Jon realized. She was the tether, child of ice and fire literalized. Fear keened in his gut. No, he said, voice hoarse. We find another way. She met his eyes, calm yet fierce. Father, I was born for this. You and Mother taught me balance. Let me be its vessel. Daenerys placed trembling fingers on Rhaella's shoulders. If you enter that breach, you may not return. Balance mended ends cycles of terror, Rhaella said. Isn't that worth any price? Jon's heart raged. He saw echoes, before the godswood, Robb before the twins, even his own stand at the wall. We live what we teach, he realized. And she had listened. Tyrion cleared his throat, eyes moist. A pragmatic might ask if there is an alternative conduit none of us have yet perceived. But time seems thin, cracks widen. Sam produced the sliver of inert emberglass. It pulsed faintly now, resonating with the greater heart. If Rhaella focuses through this, maybe the energy channels without devouring her. Daenerys nodded, tears falling. Then we guide her, together. They formed a ring around the young girl. Sam etched sigils in the ice with a dagger of storm glass. Tyrion sprinkled iron shavings to ground static. Corin planted spears at cardinal points. Daenerys and Jon each scored a shallow cut on their palms, letting blood drip to ice, merging with the etchings. Rhaella took the shard, closed her eyes. She began to hum, the resonant pillar's note transposed across ages. The ice beneath vibrated. The pillar's pulses answered, sensing to her pitch. Cracks slowed. But stress pushed through her limbs, frost rimed her hair. Embers glowed under her skin as though veins lit molten. Daenerys knelt behind, chanting in Valyrian, sending warmth but gentle. Jon knelt opposite, murmuring the stark words of old winter songs, giving calm. Aurora spiraled overhead, drawn into the maelstrom like colored threads. The heart's glow brightened, then steadied, no longer strobing. Cracks sealed in their wake. Bones around the rim lost emberglass veins that crumbled to dust. The pillar softened color, turning opaline. A final tremor rippled outward. Then silence so deep even wind dared not breathe. Rhaella sagged. Jon lunged, catching her. She was cold, too cold, but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, irises blazing for a heartbeat with aurora hues, then fading to normal gray. "Quiet," she whispered. Balanced. Daenerys pressed palms to her daughter's cheeks, warming them with gentle flame from her own breath, a trick she'd practiced with candles' harmless warmth. Rhaella smiled weakly. Sam confirmed. The energy flow equalized. Fire and frost braided but static. He looked at Rhaella in awe. "You tuned the world." The ice beneath them thickened, opalescent, safe. Drogon's distant roar carried relief. They began the long walk back beneath a sky now calm. Aurora dissolved into starlight. Tyrion trudged beside Jon. "You realize historians will call this the quieting of the heart," he mused. "They'll ask what king commanded it, and the answer will be a 13-year-old girl with honey cocoa on her breath." Jon smiled tiredly. "Let them learn that power can be gentle." Daenerys fell in step, arm weaving through Jon's. "And that ruling is guarding, not grasping." Behind them, Rhaella walked with Yoren. He leant his shoulder, though she barely leaned. She gazed at the shard in her hand, now clear as quartz, humming the faintest lullaby. At the ship's rail hours later, Jon watched the ice plain recede, feeling the planet's slow exhale. The sea itself seemed freer, waves rolling without the undercurrent of dread. Daenerys joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Balance will tip again one day," she said. He nodded. "And there will be new hands to steady it." High above, Drogon circled once more before gliding into dawn, guardian of an untitled age. Below, the windward rime set sails billowing toward home, toward hearths that glowed warm and roads that stretched wide, in a world humming quietly with mended chords, awaiting the next verse, penned by restless wanderers who refuse to wear crowns.